Understandably, the idea of changing your child's name after you adopt them is a pretty sensitive topic. Some people will tell you that you should always change your child's name, while others will completely oppose the idea of changing your child's name at all. So, what do you do in this situation? Stick around to hear about whether or not we changed our kids' names and also some advice if you decide to do so. Hey, if you are one of my subscribers, welcome back. You are near and dear to my heart, and I appreciate you so much for being here. And if we haven't met yet, hi, my name is Katie, and my husband Nick and I adopted our 3 kids from foster care as waiting children. And now it's my goal to help you do the same. And not only do I provide as much information as I possibly can through my YouTube videos, but I'm also an adoption consultant and I work with families from all across the country to help them get started on their adoption journeys. If you are feeling totally lost in the process and you want someone to walk through every step with you, go ahead and schedule a consultation with me. I always include the link in the description box below as well as in a pinned comment. Okay, so changing names in adoption. What is the best thing to do? Well, first of all, let's do one of my very favorite things, a great pastime to me, which is making a pro-con list. So some pros of changing your child's name once they're adopted are the following. First of all, most families will at the very least give their child their last name so that they can feel like a part of the family just like everyone else if the people in your family all share the same last name. The second big thing is that name changes can be important for safety purposes in certain situations, especially if your child has an extremely unique name that would make them easy to track down as they get older. And this is primarily in situations where there could be some danger if contact was made from bio family or from someone else from the child's past. I don't think that's the case in most situations, but just know that that is a reason why people do change names. This next one, in my opinion, is very important if you live in the US. By changing your child's name, you have the ability to change their social security card and number. This is highly recommended simply because you have no idea how many different people have that child's social security number, whether it was a past foster parent who needed it for some purpose, or if it was members of the biological family or extended family who may try to use that child's identity or social security number to open up a line of credit or something like that. Another reason is if your child has kind of a different name that maybe could cause them to be bullied at school, this is a great opportunity for this child to have a new name so that they don't have to deal with that. One of our friends, they adopted their son and he had a very interesting name, let's just put it that way, that sounded a lot like a type of drug. So they decided to change his name to something, and I think honestly that was in his best interest because that would have become really difficult as he got older. It might have even been difficult for him to find jobs in the future. And, I think bullying at school can be a big thing. So I think it was in his best interest, but that is a reason why sometimes people do it. And then the last reason that this could be a positive thing is that you will often find that children who are being adopted, especially if they're a little bit older, they actually want a fresh start and a new name to kind of open up this new chapter of their lives. And as strange as it sounds, I have heard many stories where the child actually wanted a new name and maybe even asked for it before the parents even brought it up. So those are the pros of changing your child's name after adoption. But now let's talk about the cons. Okay, in my mind, the first and most obvious con is that if the child hates the idea of having their name changed, that is going to make it very difficult. I mean, what kid is going to tell their friends that's their name if they don't even want their name changed to begin with? So that could be a major downside of trying to change your child's name. Another reason not to change names, or a downside of changing names, is that you have to remember that that name was given to them by their birth family. And as an adoptee, they already are being separated from their birth family. And so changing their name completely can actually strip them of some of that identity that they had in connection with their birth family. And there are situations where they're going to want to maintain some sort of connection to them. So that can be a major downside if you change their first, middle, and last name to something completely different. All of a sudden, that identity is totally gone. Along those same lines, it can actually be really awkward if you are maintaining contact with bio parents, that all of a sudden this child is going by a new name and you might accidentally say that name, or the birth parent might not want to call them by a different name. And so that can be a really awkward situation that you have to kind of navigate through if you do maintain contact, which I personally think that if you can maintain some contact, I think that is a great thing to do. It just really helps your kid understand that they are in fact loved by their bio parents, even if they couldn't care for them in the way they needed to. So that can be a little uncomfortable. May or may not have experienced that before. And lastly, it can make things at school or doctor's appointments or things like that a little bit triggering or uncomfortable for the child if they do decide to get a new name, or you give them a new name, and then when they go to the doctor, maybe it's still on their records that's their old name, or at school it's still their old name. And that can be a little bit difficult if the child did want a new name and all of a sudden people are bringing up their old name again and again and calling them by the wrong thing. That can be upsetting for some kids. So now that you know some of the pros and cons, let's talk about what our family did, because I think it's nice to hear from someone who's actually done this before, so you can kind of get an idea of how it went, how to approach it, and things like that. So just to put it out there, we did change names for all three of our children. However, we did not change their names completely. So first of all, with our older children, obviously, if you were adopting a kid, I would say over the age of 3, they're pretty used to their name. And that is something that is going to be difficult for them to change. And they may have an opinion about their name being changed. Going into the adoption of our older kids, they were 5 and 9 at the time that we met them. We were hoping to be able to change their names at least a little bit, just because of all the things with the social security card. And obviously we wanted to share our last name with them as well. But we were being very hesitant about how to enter into that conversation. I did not want them to feel like they were meeting us and then we were like, hey, we're changing your name and everything about you. So we were trying to approach it very gently with our children. And obviously we were open to the fact that our oldest especially may not be open to that at all. So we were kind of like, treading our way carefully towards the topic, but we were still thinking, okay, we're still like a couple months away from even bringing this up. But the funny thing is our daughter brought it up early on. I mean, she hadn't even officially moved into our home yet. She was still doing visits and she was like, hey, I want to know if I'm getting a new name. And can I pick the name? And she already had a name kind of picked out. It's not the name we ended up going with, but it was a name that I think was like a cool girl at school. So obviously, I would have been the same way at her age. But we ended up having a really good conversation with her about it. And my husband and I were both shocked that she already was talking about it. So we knew we had to come up with kind of a plan. One thing that we explained to her is that we believe that a name is a gift from your parents. And so that kind of played out in 2 different ways. Number 1 was that we were going to make her old first name her middle name. The reason is that that was a gift from her parents, and that's a part of who she is. And I know, listening to stories of adoptees whose names were changed, sometimes they really don't like that when they get older. And I always want her to have the option to go by her old first name when she gets older. And so that's something we told her. We said, we're not going to get rid of your first name. We're just going to make it your middle name. And it's so common that people go by their middle names instead of their first names legally on paper. And so I thought that was a good way to kind of have it both ways, where she still got to maintain that old name if she wants to go back to it, but she also gets this fresh start with a new name. And it was really special to help her pick out a name that, it's just an experience that you don't get as an adoptive parent a lot of times. So it was kind of cool that she wanted that and we got to help her walk through that experience. So what we did is we actually chose 3 names that all had a special meaning to them. And we chose meanings that we thought fit her story or who she was or something special about her. And she really loved that, let me tell you. So what I did is on my iPad, I made these little calligraphy things and I wrote each name and I wrote the meaning of each name like around it somewhere. And then on the day that we presented the names to her, we showed her each one. and she got to pick which one she liked the best. And she picked Maya. And at the same time that we gave her this option, we're Christians. And so one thing that I thought was a really cool connection is that in the Bible, there are often times where God would change someone's name after they went through a really significant experience in their life. And so we talked about how God transforms people and how, he gives us a new identity, and how I gave her examples of different people in the Bible who have been through that name change in one way or another. And it was just so meaningful to her. I mean, I thought it was kind of a cool thing. I didn't know if it would resonate with her or not, but actually her foster mom had it framed because she loved it so much. So it's now framed, and the little name thing I made for her is framed as well. And so that has been a really positive experience for our oldest child in ways that I didn't really expect. I thought that maybe she'd be hesitant to want her name changed or things like that. And so we ended up doing the same with our son, and he kept asking us, when are you going to do my name after, his sister got a new name? And so we picked out a few different names, and honestly, I have a hard time now remembering the other names we picked, but I know that I read him all 3 names, and one of them was Emmett, which is the name he chose. It was like, as soon as I said Emmett, he was like, that's the one I want. And I was like, wow, bud, you were really decisive about that. Why did you feel so strongly about the name Emmett? He goes, because it's the guy from the Lego movie. And I was like, oh my gosh. So that is why he chose the name Emmett, because of the guy from the Lego movie. So we'll see if he still likes that decision down the road when he's a little older. But it was really cute, and he actually really likes his name. And like we did with our oldest, he also had his old first name changed to his middle name, so that he can always go by that in the future if that's what he decides to do. And I will say, after our kids' names were changed, they were very adamant that they wanted them changed everywhere. At the doctor, they wanted them changed at school. Like, even though they weren't legally changed at that time, because this was still during the fostering period, they wanted to go by that. And we are so grateful because my kids' school was awesome about it. They were like, yes, we will call them that. We're going to change it in the office. We're going to make sure that if we make announcements, we say their new name. And their name wasn't even legally changed yet. So that was really sweet of the school to do. And I was honestly kind of surprised, but that's what they did. So that was really awesome. Now, with our youngest daughter, we did something slightly different. So she was only 1.5 when she moved in with us. And her name is Brielle. And I don't know, I just love that name. That's not a name I would have thought to pick on my own, but I just thought it was such a pretty name. I thought it fit her so well. And she didn't have the same emotional baggage of growing up with that name because she was so young. And so we decided to keep her name, Brielle, and we just changed her middle name and her last name. So she still has that first name that her birth mom gave her, which I think is beautiful and fits her really well. And now she has a different last name and middle name. We didn't have any safety worries or anything like that, so we felt that it was fine. Obviously, we did end up changing her social security number and her social security card once we did the name change, but otherwise, she's still Brielle. All right, so now that we've shared pros and cons and also our experience, I want to share some quick tips on what you can do if you are thinking of changing your child's name once they're adopted. The first thing is that if your child is older, I would definitely wait a while to approach the topic or see if they bring it up on their own, and tread very gently. Maybe if you're going to bring it up, just say, hey, we want to know what you think about this. Some kids, when they're adopted, they prefer to have their name changed, and others may not. And we want to know kind of where you stand on that. Definitely, you have to get this conversation out before finalization, because they will ask you for what name the child will have at that time, and it's better to just get it done then. I mean, my tip is that to do what I did. The next tip is to give them choices. So if they are a slightly older child, like maybe school age, I think there's something really special about you getting to pick the choices, but they get to choose which one actually becomes their name. So you know that any of the choices that you've come up with, you will be fine with, and they still get that ownership, and they get to feel like a sense of control about the name they're picking. Because when you're coming from foster care, you feel like you have no control. You've had no control over your life the entire time moving house to house. So those little moments of control, especially for something so important as a name, could really build some trust with your child as well. I also think something that every kid loves is a gift, but I think especially a meaningful gift. And we did this for both of our kids. Now, for my son, Emmett, we ended up getting him like a Lego name. If I can put a picture in here, I will. I got it from an Etsy shop, but it's like, it looks like something you could build Legos on, but it says Emmett. And for our daughter, obviously we had that framed artwork that I created, but there are a lot of things you could do. You could get a teddy bear with the name on it. You could do blocks with the name on it. There's all sorts of things, but that is just an idea. But I do think that can make it a really positive experience for the child to have some sort of gift associated with it and kind of symbolize that concept of a name is a gift that you give to them. I personally would recommend, as we did, that you keep their first name or at least their middle name in their new name somehow. Personally, I think going the route of keeping their first name as their middle name is really respectful, not only of the birth parents, but also respectful of your child in the future, because when they're an adult, they may want to go by that name again. And I think it's shows them some respect and shows them some freedom that you're giving them to do that in the future in a way that would be easy for them. And lastly, if you do decide to change names, definitely communicate with the school, the doctor, all of those things, and let them know of the new name as soon as you can and ask that they go by that in appointments or go by that at school, just to help your child adjust to that concept of the new name. So at the end of the day, I will say that almost every adoptive family I know changed their adopted child's name somehow, whether it was the first name, the last name, the middle name, or all of it. That is very common, at least among my circle. I don't know. I'm sure there are people who disagree. I'm sure there are others who do not like the idea of a name change, which I can totally respect. I definitely see how some people would not want to do that. But I will say all the people I know, they did that somehow, especially the last name. And in fact, most of the kids in these families that I know, they wanted a new name. So that, just like our daughter did, they were actually asking for a new name because they wanted to have this fresh start, this kind of new chapter in their lives. Now, one other note I want to throw out here is that if you are adopting a teenager, especially, you have got to make sure they are okay with the name change. You have to realize a teenager has had that name for so long, they may not want to give it up. And I think you really should respect that, because that's who that child's been forever. That's the name they've always gone by. If you can maybe make some sort of concession, like maybe they changed their last name, but I would not fight a battle where you're forcing them to change their name, because they're teenagers. They're just not going to go by that name if you give it to them and they don't want it. So really approach that carefully, especially with older kids. And you never know, they might really want a new name. So just tread carefully. So those are my tips. If you found this video helpful in any way, if you could give it a like, click that little like button. That really helps these videos make it out to more prospective adoptive families. And since you made it all the way to the end of the video, that means you're my favorite. Don't tell the others. But if you make it all the way to the end, I do like to give a super secret question that you get to answer in the comments. So since we're talking about names, I know there are people who love their middle names and people who hate their middle names. I had this friend growing up and her middle name was Louise, and she thought it was the most embarrassing thing in the world. I think the name Louise is pretty, but I don't know. It was probably just a kid thing, but she hated her middle name and I was always totally fine with mine. So if you do like your middle name, I want you to give me a thumbs up emoji in the comments. And if you do not like your middle name, give me like the fist emoji, like kind of like you're gonna beat up your middle name because you don't like it. Thanks so much for stopping by my little home here on the internet. I had a really great time hanging out with you today, and I hope that if you're not subscribed yet, you'll hit the subscribe button so we can hang out even more. Also, if you haven't heard yet, I'm moving to a Sunday upload schedule, so this will come out on a Sunday, and moving forward, I'm going to be uploading on Sundays, so you have something to watch in the afternoon while you relax or while you clean your house or whatever. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.